Brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION.
While the church is wrapped up in secular political concerns, the crushing of the traditional Latin Mass is still happening. It's well underway, and it's still being directed by Francis, even though he's not signing new documents, at least not yet, to that effect. Both Francis and his allies are speaking out against rigidity and clericalism in the Mass once again. They're even linking it to the potential coming conclave. Showed you a couple of days ago how secular media is, especially in Germany, are warning the cardinals that the American president wants Cardinal Burke to be the next pope. I doubt Donald Trump spends much time thinking about Cardinal Burke. I just call that a hunch. But they meddle in this, and all of the while, Francis and his allies are continuing to push back against the growing traditionalist movement, and they are wasting valuable time that could be spent addressing actual social and church crises. Instead, they waste that time on the TLM, which they see as a major threat to their project to transform the Catholic Church into their new synodal church. And that is their language for it, the new synodal church. It comes right out of the messages of Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich, who is one of the men who is apparently Papa Bile, who could actually become the next pope, who is one of Francis's choices in all of this. He led the Synod on Synodality, and he referred to it as the new synodal church, what they're doing. That is the language of a new religion. Make no mistake about that. And they are all pushing back against it. And what we have here is just this amazing story from LifeSite. We go here to LifeSite News for this headline: French Catholics are flocking to the Latin Mass, and this archbishop is alarmed by it. Archbishop Jordi has not limited himself to merely expressing concerns about the growth of the traditional Latin Mass. He is also taking concrete measures to limit its spread. It seems that many of the French bishops are okay with growing interest in the TLM, but one bishop here is very influential who is against it, and he's doing his best to crush the Mass altogether. And this is not the bishop who I've reported on to you before, who has been crushing the masses in like southern France. This is a different bishop entirely. Here is what he has to say. Here's the details of this article, and it's incredible. In recent years, participation in the Holy Mass in the Archdiocese of Tours has increased significantly. According to statements by Archbishop Vincent Jordi, the president of the Commission for Catechesis and the Catechumenate for the French Episcopal Conference, the number of faithful attending Mass in Tours has doubled in 4 years. However, his observations are not limited to a simple acknowledgement of the phenomenon. They reveal a hostile attitude towards this growth, as it primarily involves support for the traditional Latin Mass. For those who aren't aware, the traditional Latin Mass, there are apparently per capita more people who go to the traditional Latin Mass in the church in France than there are in the United States. Smaller country, but a greater share of the Catholics there attend Mass in the traditional pre-conciliar form. This worries the French bishops, at least some of them. Speaking to La Nouvelle République, Archbishop Jordi describes the increase in faithful attending Mass in the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite as a, quote, traditionalist phenomenon, which he claimed originated from the 2020 crisis. He attributed this growth to anxiety among people and a retreat into oneself. Yes, the traditional Mass is a retreat into oneself. That's what he's saying. The prelate also suggested that participation in the traditional Latin Mass has been used by many faithful as a form of protest against restrictions and even state institutions. Again, remember all that talk about polycrises covered earlier. The traditional Latin Mass is viewed as part of that. Amazing stuff. While it cannot be denied that many Catholics experience the denial of the sacraments during that as an act of injustice, it is reductive to claim that adherence to the traditional liturgy is merely a political rebellion. What truly attracts many faithful, especially young people, to the traditional Latin Mass is the beauty and dignity of the rite, as well as its continuity with the Church's tradition. In the Diocese of Tours, 3 Masses in the ancient rite are celebrated on weekends at the Church of Saint-Pierre-Ville, as well as 2 monthly celebrations at L'Île Bouchard. The Society of St. Pius X, that's the FSSPX or the SSPX, also celebrates the traditional Latin Mass in Tours at the Church of Saint-Gregoire des Minimes. My apologies again for now shredding the French language. interest in the traditional Mass is more alive than ever. What stands out is Archbishop Jordy's attitude towards this ecclesial reality. He distinguishes between fundamentalists, that's the SSPX, and traditionalists, the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, or FSSP, a categorization that reflects a very critical view of both these communities. Furthermore, the prelate does not hesitate to issue, quote, warnings to the FSSP priest within the interview, openly declaring that he's ready to take punitive measures, as has happened in other French dioceses. I have discussed this Mass several times with Pope Francis, the Archbishop declared. If you remember, it was reported that Francis had a document on his desk to go much further than Traditionis Custodes in restricting the Latin Mass. And apparently, he got kind of tired of, allegedly, so the story goes, he got tired of being pushed by ideologues to ban the Mass because he doesn't apparently care that much one way or the other about the issue. And so he just tabled it. This is one of the bishops who's doing that pressuring. And I don't think we're out of the woods yet either on that. Jordy has not limited himself to merely expressing concerns about the growth of the traditional Mass. He's also taken concrete measures to limit its spread. According to reports by La Petite Liturgique, the Archbishop of Tours has banned the FSSP from administering adult baptisms and has imposed a new liturgy for infant baptisms. Additionally, Jordy has introduced restrictions on confession, reducing the hours in which priests can hear them. These interventions seem to be part of a strategy to marginalize gradually the traditional liturgy, despite the growing demand from the faithful. End quote. Yeah, you heard that right. He hates the traditional liturgy so much that he restricted how often or the hours that a priest can hear confessions in the preconciliar form. Imagine how evil somebody has to be to say, you're hearing too many confessions in a form I don't like. Be happy this man does not have any authority over the Eastern rites. And men like that don't have any authority over the Eastern rites, because many people have figured out that once they're done with the Latin Mass, whatever they do, once they achieve what they set out to achieve, they will turn their attention to the East. At least to the Eastern rites that haven't completely Novus Ordo'd up their liturgies, because that's happened a lot too. But he was threatening the FSSP priests for getting too political and being too fundamentalist. Remember, church officials across Europe have been very vocal in opposing the growth of what they call right-wing populist political movements. So the hypocrisy here is astonishing. But that's not all. You see, they're being egged on by Francis himself. So we go here back to the English language portal for katholisch.de. Again, official German bishop's news site. This is just their English language one. With the headline, Pope from the Clinic, avoid pomp and splendor in the liturgy. In one of his first messages from the hospital, Pope Francis called for humility and modesty in the celebration of the liturgy. The liturgical style is about expressing the following of Jesus. Now, this is one of the oldest, tiredest attacks on the traditional Mass, that it's all pomp and circumstance, and it's not about following Jesus. And here he's telling people this is a dig at the traditional movement, but it's also a dig at those of you who attend the unicorn masses, as people call them, the reverent Novus Ordo, as people will call it. I will remind people that Traditionis Custodes and its accompanying letter and the responses ad dubia that came out a couple months later from the Vatican explicitly says no to what you call a reverent Novus Ordo, what they call the accretions of the traditional liturgy onto the new Mass. They don't want the Mass reverent. You got to ask yourself why they don't want the Mass reverent. Because if you've ever read what the saints have said about the liturgy, about its purpose and the kind of the sacredness of it and how it should be taken very seriously and it should be extraordinarily reverent, and yes, it should have all the pomp and all the rest of it, it's fitting to God to offer worship like that. You have to wonder what their motivation is here, because at the end of the day, this sounds an awful lot like the kind of critique of the Mass that would come from Judas Iscariot. Here's what Francis had to say. Again, officially published by the German bishops, who are not going to take him out of context on this. Trust me on that one. In a message from his sickbed in the Gemelli Clinic, Pope Francis called for more humility and modesty in the liturgy. Every diocese looks to the bishop of the cathedral as a model worthy of imitation for the celebration of the liturgy. I therefore urge you to propose and promote a liturgical style that expresses the following of Jesus and avoids unnecessary ostentation and splendor. The Pope's message, published on Friday, reads, in it, the head of the church addresses the participants of a course for those responsible for episcopal liturgical celebrations at the Pontifical Athenaeum of St. Anselm. A liturgist is, quote, not only a teacher of theology, he's not a scribe who applies the norms, he's not a sacristan who prepares what is necessary for the celebration, said the Pope. He is a teacher who places himself at the service of the prayer of the community. While he humbly teaches the liturgical art, he must guide all those celebrating, observe the ritual rhythm and accompany the faithful in the sacramental event. Pope Francis advises those responsible for the liturgy to look at the people of God, whose shepherd and father is the bishop. This will help you to understand the needs of the faithful and to find the forms and ways to encourage their participation in the liturgy. The service is the work of the whole congregation, said the head of the church. The meeting of teaching and pastoral care is not an optional technique, but a constitutive aspect of the liturgy, which must always be embodied and culturated in order to express the faith of the church. Enculturated here, as an aside, is an interesting word. That means it's to have local parts of the culture involved. This is where you get your Mayan rite of Mass and your Zimbabwe or Zaire use rite and the other rumored rites of the Mass that they're working on that will bear little resemblance, if any, to a Catholic liturgy by the time they're done. Message is signed from the Gemelli Polyclinic, 26 February 2025. It was first message sent by the Pope explicitly from the hospital. Francis was admitted to the hospital on 14th of February, yada, yada, yada. You know the story. At this point, with his health, continue to pray. But apparently, we're not to have liturgy that is beautiful. It's too much pomp. It blocks the way of active participation, which is on its face nonsense. If you have ever read anything on the liturgy from the saints and from the doctors of the church, I recently put up something, a segment from Pope Pius XII's Mediator Dei, which is his encyclical on the liturgy and other things. And he actually talked about what active participation actually is. I think it was in the most recent episode of that. You can easily find it in my channel videos. I would suggest you check that out, or just read Mediator Dei for yourself, although it's a pretty long encyclical, hence why I'm doing it in about 10-minute segments every other week. All right, folks. Any final thoughts? Let me know in the comments or in the live chat. I'm curious what you have to say about this. Are you this surprised that they are not wasting time to continue going after the traditional Mass? I almost take this as a sign of Francis' recovery, honestly, that he's doing this. But others will say that he's being manipulated. I don't know what the truth is. We will all find out together. But I'm curious what you have to say about this. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, please. And like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. Sharing this on social media helps too. And as always, pray for the church and anybody we spoke about in this video today. We're not here to work you up into a lather up towards people. Pray for them. And please, I hope you continue to have a good Lent. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.